Welcome, everybody. This is the DVMUG Zoom meeting for Tuesday, January 24th, and we have a special presenter this week, Christian Pickman from Micromat, who's going to be showing us the new TechTool Pro 17. Go ahead, take it away.
Thank you, John. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And I'm Christian Pickman, product manager at Micromat Incorporated here in lovely Sonoma County. Today, we're going to be talking and we're going to be demonstrating TechTool Pro 17. It's our Mac hardware, disk repair, disk optimization, data recovery tool, along with some other tools we'll go over later in the presentation. With the release of TechTool Pro 17, we've added macOS Ventura support, or macOS 13. This version of TechTool Pro supports any Mac version from 10.13 High Sierra all the way up to Ventura. If you have a previous version of the Mac operating system, say like Sierra or El Capitan or Mavericks, for example, we have older versions of TechTool Pro that are still available. If you need that, you would just contact our sales department at sales@micromat.com. So when you launch TechTool Pro 17, this is the screen you are presented with. As you can see here, we have in the top portion of TechTool Pro 17 at the top left corner, we have a test category, which is what we are currently in. Next to that, we have a tools category. And then finally, in the category section, we have a reports category. We'll go over all three of those categories, starting with tests first. And in the test category, all the tests that we have in here are just validation only. There's no repair, there's no fixing of any type. It's strictly just to validate and check and confirm that everything on your Mac, whether it be hardware or software, is working as expected. The first window, very bottom portion of the window, is our check computer configuration. We'll kind of go over this at the end of the tools section. But as you can see here, it tells you what Mac you have. And on Intel Macs, it tells you when the Mac was built, where it was built. And if you have it connected to a power source, like in this case, I have an iMac connected to a UPS, it can tell you that it's connected via AC power, at least that's the power source, and the UPS that is connected to it via USB is fully charged. Alongside the iMac icon, we have the drives that are connected to the Mac, kind of a nice way of showing you all the devices that are connected to your Mac currently before you run TechTool Pro. Up in the stage area, we have 5 dials. They are USB, looks at the USB of the Mac. Cache, which is your L1, L2, or L3 cache. The processor, obviously the processor, which runs everything. The network dial, which tells you how fast your network speed is. In this case, I'm at 1 gigabit. I'm connected via Ethernet. And then I have Thunderbolt 3 on this iMac, which runs at 40 gigabits per second. If any of those items happen to have some sort of detected failure, they would highlight in red upon launch. They're immediate tests. So right when you launch TechTool Pro for the first time, it tests immediately to see if there's any problems. So I'm going to move on to our first test, which is obviously our memory test. This is a test that we've had since version 1 of TechTool Pro, and it continues in TechTool Pro 17. This test tests all the available RAM that we can capture. Obviously, the operating system takes its portion. We can't get that, of course, but we can get the rest of it. And we go through and we test the memory of your machine. We also give you, in this case, a layout of the memory modules inside the Mac. In this case, for my iMac, I have every module or every slot occupied by a memory module. And if you hover over one of the modules, it'll give you a tooltip with the information about what module name it is, how big it is, what type it is, and the speed, and also gives you an indication whether it's okay or if it has an issue. But obviously, our memory test is to exercise the memory to find any problems that may exist within the memory modules. And by testing the memory, all you do is click this one button called Run Memory Test, and it will go through and test all the memory that it's able to capture. Now, for demonstration purposes, if I do that, I may slow down everything, so I'm not going to do that at this moment. So I'm going to go to our next test, which is our surface scan test. This test is looking for any drive, whether it be internal or external, whether it's USB, Firewire, Thunderbolt, PCIe, whatever it may be. It'll look for bad sectors or bad blocks that may exist on the device. Bad blocks and bad sectors can occur when the device may have improperly wrote data to it, or if, say, for example, you may have accidentally disconnected the drive or powered the machine down while it was writing data to the drive, that could create a bad block. Generally speaking, most drives are able to remap bad blocks automatically, not like back in the day where you would actually have to run a utility to actually tell it to remap bad blocks. All modern drives, whether they be rotational or solid state, are able to do that on their own. However, once they run out of space to map out bad blocks can no longer be mapped out. And when that occurs, that's where our surface scan test becomes very important. It can tell you whether there's bad blocks or not. And if there are, that's a very good indication that that particular device is no longer reasonable for storing data onto. It should be replaced with a drive of equal or greater size. You may notice here that there's a couple of drives, like this drive here and this drive here, which are grayed out. This iMac in particular has an Apple Fusion setup. And with the release of macOS 10.13 and greater, we can't do a surface scan on the internal drive. Now, the way to get over that issue is you could either use our eDrive feature and boot from the eDrive that you create, or you can create your own bootable drive, boot from it, install TechTool Pro on it, and then you would be able to run a surface scan test on either of these two internal drives because they're no longer the active system. So that's why those two are grayed out. Our next test that we have is our SMART test. SMART may sound like, yeah, it's really smart, but actually it's an acronymical meaning. SMART is, the acronymical meaning for SMART is Self-Monitoring Analysis Report Technology. And that's a technology that's built into all drives, whether they be rotational or solid state. In this case, we support both SATA and NVMe or PCIe Express drives. To give you an example of what a PCIe SMART test result looks like, and I'll pop that up really quick here on the screen. It looks like that. It's a lot cleaner. I kind of prefer it. I'm kind of glad that they went this way as a standard. For NVMe drives, which most Macs have, of course, all Apple Silicon Macs have it, and the latter part of Intel machines have them as well. Can tell you where you are in the life of a solid state drive. And in this case, I've only used 7% of the solid state drive. So I have 93% of life remaining on the solid state drive. So I have some life ahead of me here. I will say, though, this is my second solid state drive in this machine because I use this machine to build on, and I build on it quite religiously. And so when I have a solid state drive, I can probably go through one in about 1.5 years, 2 years. But most people, probably not. Probably the life of the computer, you'll probably have the same solid state drive. I'm just weird. That's just how I am. But from other people who have SATA drives or serial attached drives, this is what it would look like. Basically, it's a graphical representation of the drive. In this case, this is part of my Apple Fusion drive, the rotational side of it. And as you can see, everything on my rotational side of my Apple Fusion drive is coming up just fine. And of course, we support external drives if you install our SAT Smart driver, which comes with TechTool Pro 7. It's an option in the TechTool Pro 17 menu item. And that's documented in our documentation as well. So that's our SMART tool or our SMART test. Moving along, we have our partition map test. This is just looking at the partition map of all the devices connected to your Mac as long as they're GPT or GUID, which is the base standard for APFS or macOS extended formatted volumes. And of course, this is a very quick test. Probably just speed right by here. But if it finds a problem, then you would just jump over to our tools category. and you take it right to partition repair. And if it finds a problem in the partition map test, you come here to the tools part, partition repair, select the drive that was reporting an error, and then you would just do the run partition repair. Again, our test category is strictly validation. All the repairs or changes would be done in the tools category. So that's our partition map test. Going a little bit deeper, we have our volume structures test. This is looking at whether it's an APFS volume, Mac OS Extended or HFS Plus, exFAT, we support exFAT volumes, and we also support FAT32 or MS-DOS volumes as well in this test. And again, all you do is you select, hit run, and it goes through and it does a quick run, in this case, of an APFS volume. I don't think I have much data on here, so this is a good one to test on. And when it's done, it just gives you a pass result. Should give you a pass result. And there you are. Again, if there's a problem here in the volume structures test where there was an issue found, very much like what we have partition map, you go to the tools category, go to volume rebuild in this case, select the volume, and then hit the run volume rebuild. And that would then go ahead and do a repair of that selected volume. Our next test is our video memory test. We've had this test since version 1 of TechTool Pro. It continues in TechTool Pro 17. Basically, what we're doing here is we're exercising the video memory of the machine, whether it is integrated with the RAM itself of the machine, or if it's a separate dedicated video memory stick. In this case, this machine uses a dedicated video RAM module. And so we exercise that by drawing on the screen and going through every bit that way of the video memory to make sure it's passing and that there's no issues encountered. Our next test is the sensors test. This test is looking at all the sensors on your Mac, whether it be temperature sensors, voltage sensors, sensors that are for amperage for like airport cards, anything Bluetooth cards inside your machine. And I can run that really quick. And on this particular map, I think this Mac, we look at the light sensor, if I recall. See if it finishes here. And yeah, we have a light sensor. So my ambient light sensor is at 165 lux. Cool. But again, we look at all the sensors here, and we have a upper and lower limit of all the sensor information for every particular Mac. And if it drops below a threshold or exceeds a threshold, it comes up as either a warning or a failure, depending on what it is. And in this case, like I said, we look at currents, we look at voltages, we look at power, and then finally we look at the temperature sensors of the Mac to make sure they're not deviating too high or too low for normal, consistent operation of your Mac computer. Moving right along, we have our file structures test. This is going to look on the selected volume for any issues with plist files, XML files, graphic files, whether they be BMP or JPEG or PNG or TIFFs. And then if you wanted to, you can even work deeper. You can look at audio and video media, whether it be MPEG, MPEG-3 or MPEG-4, PDF files. We're looking to make sure that they're not corrupted. There's no issues. If we find any problems, whether they be minor or corrupted files, we give you a list of all those files that we found that have an issue that maybe you need to either replace with a known good copy or perhaps delete because it's no longer needed, or maybe the reason why an app's not running or not opening. This is a good tool to use and a good test to have to look to see if there's any issues with any files that might exist inside or on that particular volume. Our next test is the fans test. This is looking at the fans, or fan in this case on this iMac, to make sure that it is getting to its target high speed and is able to drop to its target low speed. Obviously, heat is a big issue when it comes to computers. Most of the new Macs either have one or even no fans now because they run pretty cool. But there are some Macs that are still out there that run sometimes 2, 3, 4, and I've seen we have an old Xserve in the server room from years ago that has 18 of them. That's a fun test to run on that machine because when I run the fans test on that old Xserve, it sounds like I'm starting up a jet engine. But this is a good test to be sure the fan is meeting the requirement of being able to run to its highest threshold and be able to drop down to its normal operation speed without much problems. If it finds a problem with it, obviously instead of saying pass, it's going to say failed. If it does find an issue, generally speaking, you'd probably want to take it to your Apple service provider for them to look at. I can tell you that I had a Mac Pro, a 2012, that had a lot of dust in it and a lot of stuff and a lot of crud inside of it. Opening it up, because it's a Mac Pro of that model, I can open it up, I compressed aired it, cleaned it out, and then the fan was able to run at full speed again. But some cases, like in this case, like my iMac, it's probably best to take it to someone who's able to open it up safely for you. Moving right along, we have our battery check test. This is useful for Mac notebook computers, but it also can be useful, as you can see here, for people who have iOS devices. And in this case, it's no different. You can see that it has found my iPhone 11 and a couple of iPads that are floating around the office, it looks like. This is helpful to know how well the battery is, whether it be inside your Mac notebook computer or, in my case, my lovely iPhone. And as you can see, my iPhone has had about 701 cycles, which is getting there. Capacity of life is still reasonably good, and even tells you how old the battery is. So this looks like it's the original battery when I bought this iPhone from 2019. But this is a great test to be able to detect if there's an issue with the battery, whether it be inside a notebook like a MacBook Pro or a MacBook Air, or like in my case, I have an iMac, it doesn't have battery in it, but it's able to detect my iPhone and 2 iPads that we've had connected to it recently, whether they're good or bad. Our next test is Bluetooth test, a very simple test. All this does is it makes sure that the Bluetooth module inside this iMac, or Mac in this case, is able to connect, disconnect, enable, communicate correctly using the Bluetooth protocol that's inside this computer. And so far, so good. I hope so, because I have a wireless keyboard. And finally, I won't run this test because I don't want to get disconnected, but our network test. This tests the network ports, whether you're connecting via Wi-Fi or Ethernet, or maybe you're using your phone as a way to connect to the internet. It makes sure that it can able to communicate through those ports by powering them off, powering them back on, and that it's able to send a signal through them. So that's our network interface test. But say you don't want to run every individual test like I just walked through. Well, then you would do Check Computer. Check Computer allows you to do all the tests that I just showed you with one click of the mouse by clicking on the Run Check Computer button that you see at the bottom right corner. Now, you can customize by going to Configure. And I don't know if it's going to bring it up on your screen here. I don't believe it will, but it might. In fact, let me try, bear with me here, even though I use this a lot. Let me see, where are we? Are we still connected here? Let me do a new share. There we go. Can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. This allows you to customize the Check Computer suite to what you want it to be. So that way you can make a new suite if you wanted to. You can manage suites. You can basically customize what we don't already have there for you, which is really a nice feature. So let me go back to here. Let me go back to resume share. Let me hold on here. Looks like I lost my sharing ability for a moment there. There we go. All right. Let me change it back to the main screen. Share. There we go. Now close this out. So yeah, we allow you to customize, configure your Czech computer suites if you want. But in most cases, what I usually do is I do the intermediate suite. That's the default suite that we have when you first launch TechTool Pro. That would be the one I would use. But if you want to customize it, you certainly have the power to customize what you want to do within the test category of Pro. All right, so we're going to move over to the tools category. Does anyone have any questions regarding what I just talked about in tests? I'll take that as a no. Okay.
Everybody was muted at the beginning of the meeting, so if you want to ask a question, you got to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Still waiting to hear. So I think we're probably okay. I'm assuming. Okay. All right. So here we are in the tools category. And you may notice, I know for some of you who might be longtime TechTool Pro users, you're looking at this and you're going, where's the eDrive feature? Where's TechTool Pro go? Which has come with TechTool Pro for many versions now. Well, they're not included anymore. And it's not by our own choosing. Apple made that happen to us. What happened is with all the security updates that the Mac operating system has been taking on the last few versions, starting with Monterey, which was Mac OS 12, the previous version, we can no longer create eDrives or TechTool Pro devices if you're using Mac OS Monterey and now continue onward with Mac OS Ventura. And the reason being is Apple requires that the operating system be code signed and signed. In other words, you just can't copy the active operating system like we've done for years to another volume. You actually have to physically install it onto a separate volume or drive in order for it to be bootable now. And that's the security feature that Apple put in those operating systems and will continue onward. So if you're running Big Sur or earlier, you still have the option of eDrive and TechTool Pro to go. However, if you have Mac OS Monterey and Ventura now, you'll have to download the appropriate installer, install an operating system on a separate drive or a separate volume, and that would become essentially your eDrive or Protogo device that you would use to boot from if you're using the latest versions of the current and the last operating system from Apple. It's something that we wanted to continue with, but unfortunately they stopped support for it, so we had to take it out. So that's why you're not seeing eDrive and TechTool Protogo in here. But what you are seeing, of course, is partition repair, like you saw earlier when I was talking about the partition map test in the test category. Again, if there's a partition map issue, this is the tool you come to. Volume rebuild, if there's a volume structure issue, whether it be Mac OS Extended, HFS Plus, APFS, exFAT, FAT32, you come to the volume rebuild configuration tool. If you still have HFS Plus volumes connected to your Mac, you can still do, even if you're running Ventura, you can still do a file and volume optimization. However, you cannot do a file or volume optimization for an APFS volume. Why is that? Well, Apple does not give us the documentation that we need to make it happen, nor do they supply the APIs that macOS extended format volumes have for doing such a task. And that's just really how it is. Most APFS volumes are on solid-state drives. Solid-state drives have the ability to actually manage free space much more efficiently than a rotational drive. Typically, a rotational drive will probably be HFS Plus. APFS is now becoming the default file system for both internal and external drives now. I don't know if you've noticed that, but if you go into disk utility using Monterey or greater, With the new drive, the default file system that it'll come up with in Apple's disk utility will be APFS, not macOS Extended Format like it had been in the past. So with those two things there, really doing a volume and file optimization on APFS volume is just not possible. So eventually you'll probably see as macOS Extended Format volumes go away and don't become an option in disk utility anymore, you'll probably see these two tools probably go away as well. Hopefully we can figure out something maybe that we can use if Apple allows us, but this is really just the way it is for the time being. Moving along, we have our volume cloning tool, a very cut and dry volume cloning tool. It just copies from source to destination. That's all it really does. It either does a duplicate clone of the source volume to the destination, or it just does a file sync clone, which is just copy the data over. Don't worry about it being bootable. Just copy it as a way to get it off the drive. If you like to archive in the volume cloning tool, we have a subcategory called test or disk image cloning. I use this tool for sometimes I'll archive a computer before I erase it to a disk image, and that way I can save the disk image somewhere else, and that way I can reference it later. You have the option of making a disk image be a sparse bundle disk image, a sparse image disk image, or a read-only disk image, and then compression. And you also have the ability to have it encrypted, whether it be 128 or 256. So I kind of use disk image cloning most of the time for myself to archive a drive before I erase it. Our next tool is our snapshot recovery tool. This is something that had been introduced, I believe, in TechTool Pro 11. This is a tool that kind of came out of APFS becoming the new file system that Apple provides. This is something that we lobbied for from Apple to create our own APFS snapshots. Apple creates their own if you have an Apple Time Machine setup. But we thought it would be a great idea to allow the user to create their own APFS volumes, or excuse me, the snapshots that they could use for data recovery on APFS volume.
Can you tell us what a snapshot is on an APFS
Sure.
disk?
So what it is basically it's not a copy of all the files on the APFS volume, but what it is a map of where all those files reside. And the way APFS works is it kind of does things in deltas and in layers. I don't mean to get too technical here, but basically when the snapshot goes away, so does a layer go away. So even though the file might be gone in its current present form, it's still technically still there if the snapshot is there from when the file was available. So what we allow you to do is kind of like a time machine setup in a way without actually having a time machine drive, dedicated drive set up on your Mac. I've used this a number of times where I accidentally had a Mac that didn't have a time machine backup drive, but I had this feature enabled and I accidentally deleted something, where I would select the APFS snapshot of that date and time that I believe that file existed. And then I would either do a mount snapshot, and it comes up almost like a disk image, where the window comes up, and then I can traverse down into the directory where I believe the file existed. Or if I knew the name of the file, I would just type it in here, and then I would do a locate item, selected on that APFS snapshot. And then it would bring me a listing of all the things that match site criterion. And then I could select it and recover it that way. So it's a great feature that Apple put in here with APFS, the snapshots feature. They have their own, but you have to have Time Machine enabled or have a Time Machine backup drive enabled, dedicated drive for it. And then we thought it would be a great idea to do it on our own, but save it in the APFS container space. as a way to recover data if someone accidentally deletes something off your computer. The one caveat with our APFS snapshots over Apple's APFS snapshots is if you needed to restore from a backup using a snapshot, ours aren't supported by Apple. Only Apple supported APFS snapshots are supported. So for example, if you boot to your recovery partition and you use the recovery option to recover data or recover a drive booted from their recovery partition, our snapshots won't display. Only Apple ones will display. We tried to get ours to display in that list, and Apple said no. Fine. Anyway, this is a great feature to have. So any APFS volume you have connected to your Mac, I don't think I have them on this one particularly, but I do on my main drive. A great way to, if you need to, in a pinch, recover data really quickly. If you don't have a time machine backup, or me, I have redundancy. I actually do have a time machine set up here because here are some of my time machine backup snapshots. This is a machine that I do a lot of testing and building on, so I like having that redundancy just in case. Our next tool is our data recovery tool. In this case, you just see drives listed here. This data recovery tool is really meant for people who have older macOS extended formatted drives to recover data that way. The one big benefit with the APFS that I just demonstrated with the snapshot recovery is the snapshot makes it so easy to recover data if you have snapshots enabled on your Mac, especially if you have it through TechTool Pro. Whereas with macOS extended format, data recovery was really a difficult task and couldn't guarantee that you would be able to recover the file in its entirety. But we still continue to offer the data recovery tool in the event that you're trying to recover something that's on a macOS extended formatted volume through TechTool Pro. And again, you have the ability to select a drive, type in, a criterion to search for, and then do a search on that particular drive trying to find it. Our next tool is a convenience tool, as I like to call it. This allows you to reinitialize a volume that is in the list here to a particular volume type if you want. Instead of having to go outside of TechTool Pro, go into Applications, Utilities, Apple's Disk Utility, and then select the volume you want to initialize, we just make it convenient for you to do it right here. Just select the drive, click Initialize Volume, and then change it to whatever type you want it to change it to, and then click Initialize. You also have the ability to lock the volume within TechTool Pro, so that way you don't accidentally, through TechTool Pro, reinitialize a volume you don't want to initialize. Our next feature is kind of the Uber version of wiping a drive, wipe data. This allows you to wipe either files, folders, volumes, or wipe free space if it's macOS extended format. And then we give you various options on how it's written to the disk, whether it be all zeros, ones and zeros, all ones, random ASCII characters. And just like with any wipe utility, the number of passes, whether it be 1, 3, 7, or if you really are just not feeling it, 35 overwrites if you have the time.
Christian,
yeah,
Apple hasn't allowed you to do wipe data on for a long time with disk, to securely erase them. So can you erase SSD drives?
If they are Mac OS extended formats, yes. If they're APFS, no.
Right.
That's the caveat.
Right.
That's the difference. Is you can't do a wipe free space on APFS because it does it already. We tried doing it on our own, and Apple basically said no. So
as these drives get older and they're in everything, when it comes time to get rid of these and you want to securely delete them, I heard a recommendation is what you want to do is turn on encryption and encrypt the drive, and then it's unrecoverable.
Well,
That's
the one thing with solid state drives, especially the ones that are now connected via NVMe, is as that space becomes less and less. In other words, remember when I was in Smart, I'll go back to it for a moment. I'll select my NVMe internal. You'll notice that I have 7% used already. That 7% is already zeroed out. And then this 93 is what's left of my 100%. And as that number of use gets greater and greater, it gets zeroed out more and more. So it gets to a point where eventually it'll go over 100%. In other words, when I had to replace my drive in this computer, I had this percent remaining, or no, percent used at 120%. And at that point, yeah, I would encrypt it or do something with it, or put it on a shelf, or pull it out and whack it with a hammer and break it into a million pieces.
well, that's the ones that I've had a few SSDs die recently, and if they're fully dead, I just break them in half and throw them away. But if I wanted to, securely erase it and reuse it in another machine, previously on a spinning drive, I'd, wipe the data.
Sure.
But now I guess just encrypt it and then erase it.
And again, you got to remember, solid state drives also do their wipe free space as they work. So whatever data you have on that drive is the data that you have on your drive. When you initialize it using Apple's disk utility, or if you initialize it using our volume initialization, it basically wipes it out.
Oh, it does. So you don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
You can't,
Yeah.
once it's reinitialized, it's unrecoverable.
It basically zaps everything off of it. Yeah.
Okay.
So what you want to do is, if it's an internal drive, what I would recommend, you may have seen this. You see this little guy right here, my install macOS Ventura. I boot from him. I would actually boot from that, which is actually on an SD card in this machine. And that allows me to reinitialize, in this case, the entire Apple Fusion drive, and not just the system portion with its data portion. It allows me to do from 0 block all the way to N block. Whereas if I boot from the recovery partition, that's a part of the internal drive. Yes, it does do the system and data portion of the drive, but it doesn't do what I'm booted from, which I want to do.
Right. That's what I've been doing.
Yeah. So I would boot from completely a separate, different device, reinitialize it that way. That way, you're getting it from block 0 all the way to N block. That's how I would do it. That's my recommendation for addressing a solid state drive, especially if it's internal. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Disk speed. Pretty much like you may be familiar with the de facto Blackmagic speed test for testing a drive. We kind of do the same thing. We're just looking to see how fast that particular drive runs at, both read and write. This is a 5 or 6 year old machine, so it's not going to be a speed demon in any way, shape, or form. But at least the solid state drive size of things gives me a pretty good write amount, which is kind of nice. But this is basically to benchmark the drives that are connected to your Mac, whether they be internal or external, whether they be Firewire, Thunderbolt, USB, whatever they might be. As long as they show up here, we can do a speed test on them and tell you how fast the read and writes are for that particular device. Our next test is our internet speed test. I won't run this right now because I don't want to affect my presentation here. But very much like Ookla, they have their speed test. We have a speed test. We just tell you how fast your internet speed is for both up and down, and the ping. And there's the other one I can't remember. There's another one that we test for as well. This just gives you results on how fast your internet connection is for your Mac. Our next set of tools are basically maintenance tools. Your Mac by design, actually through the operating system, does do these. There are a daily, a weekly, and a monthly. Basically, it does its own housekeeping. But if you want to force that housekeeping to happen like right away, you have the option of checking all these boxes for both daily, weekly, and monthly, and doing it all in one shot. Maybe you think your Mac is running a little slow at startup, or maybe there's just something that doesn't seem right to you. Sometimes forcing these to run, even though they run at prescribed times, might help. If not, you can go on to the next set of rebuilds, which is our cache rebuild. This would rebuild the cache for the boot cache, the DNS. Say, for example, you go to a website, but it takes a long time for it to come up. Maybe the DNS cache is a little bit corrupted. We can clear the DNS cache. If fonts are taking a long time to display, maybe the font cache needs to be updated again. We can do that. And then finally, our dock cache, which is the Mac OS X dock at the bottom of the screen, typically where all your icons are. Maybe one of them is not displaying the correct application icon or document icon down there. We clear that cache to be able to force it to rebuild the cache for it to display that icon correctly. The one thing that you see grayed out is kernel cache. That is only available if you are running Mac OS Big Sur or earlier. Kernel cache is no longer something that we can get to, and I don't think Apple even allows. Monterey and Ventura, it doesn't allow it anymore. Our next tool that we added in TechTool Pro 16 and continues in 17 is our database rebuild tool. These are tools and databases that are used for launching apps. The launch services database, that is used for launching daemons or any service that loads during startup or during user login. Spotlight, pretty obvious what that is. That Spotlight database is used for searching for stuff on your Mac. Unchecked is our Apple Mail database. That rebuilds the Apple Mail database for you if you're having problems with Apple Mail and the way it gets your mail to display on the screen. Locate database is something that I use in Terminal for doing searches. In Terminal, the locate database allows me to locate stuff using Terminal, like a find or a witch. That's kind of a geeky thing, so I apologize. And then finally, our accessibility database. That database is the database that's used for telling the Mac what things you have allowed the Mac to use for particular apps, like cameras and microphones. What apps have access to your cameras and microphone? Maybe for whatever reason, Zoom is not allowing you or not adding your video camera for whatever reason. Maybe the accessibility database is corrupt. What we would do there is we basically clear the accessibility database, create a new one for you, and that should hopefully allow you to add Zoom for the video camera to then be presented to you. So we add a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't require you to be a terminal geek. It does it all for you here in the database rebuild tool. Moving along, we have our volume journaling. This is kind of a vestige from the past, but we continue to offer it. If you happen to have a macOS extended formatted volume like the one I've selected, this allows you to, if you wanted to, disable journaling from that particular volume. Obviously, journaling is not a part of APFS. It's only a part of macOS extended formatted volumes. And journaling, what is that? Well, like I probably said in the past with prior meetings when it comes to journaling, but I'll remind you of it again. Journaling in macOS extended format terms basically is like the flight data recorder of an HFS Plus volume. So for example, if for whatever reason you're writing data to that volume, the journaling file gets updated as a write occurs. And if something goes wrong during the write process, what that journaling file does is it makes sure that it limits or protects you from data corruption of that volume. So for example, if I was writing something to it and I accidentally knock that drive loose and it disconnects, when I reconnect the drive back onto my Mac, the first thing it's going to notice is it was disconnected improperly. And the first thing it's going to do is FSCK, or fixed disk, which is a part of the Mac operating system, will look at the journal file and it'll look and compare to what the volume looks like currently and what the journal file has. If it finds any changes that hadn't been written that the journal file has, it'll write that to the volume as a means to prevent it from being a corrupted volume. So really, it acts like a safety net when it comes to an HFS plus volume. But we've kept it in there because we have some users who have older Macs who want to have that, where they want to take an older drive and take it to an older machine that maybe doesn't support a journal HFS plus or HFS volume. So we keep it in TechTool Pro. Our next tool is Home Permissions. This is no longer supported in macOS Ventura, but it is supported in macOS Monterey and earlier. This feature, if you're running Monterey and earlier, allows the Mac to correct any issues in the home permission or the home folder of your Mac that may not be set correctly to that particular logged in user. So if you copy something over that didn't copy over the permissions correctly when you copied it into your home directory or into your desktop or to your documents folder, this tool, if you're running macOS Monterey and earlier, would correct that. So for example, if I copy something over and for whatever reason it copied over as the system file and didn't get written as me, I try opening it, it won't open. It says, sorry, you don't have permissions for this. Running this tool should correct that. And then when the tool is done repairing the issue of that file, you should then be able to open that file afterwards. So that's what the Home Permissions tool is. All right, just need a little bit of water. The next tool is App Check. This is something that we added in TechTool Pro 15. And I'm not going to run it really quick here because it might take a while. This is actually looking to see if any of the apps in your applications folder or wherever you choose to navigate to, if the applications that you have are 32-bit or 64-bit, are they Intel only apps? Are they apps that are universal? Are they apps that are only Apple Silicon and not universal or Intel only? So basically interrogates your applications folder to tell you what apps are on your Mac and whether they're able to run on that Mac, or maybe you need to update it because you have an Apple Silicon Mac, but the application is only Apple Intel only, or maybe the app isn't code signed. We tell you whether the app is code signed or not. So we kind of just give you a quick overview of all the apps that are in your applications folder, whether or not they are compatible with the Mac and operating system in which you're running on. Our next tool is more of a geeky tool that even is way above my head. But we have people who are asking if we could do a benchmark test of the processor. So you asked for it, we provide it. That is what our processor check tool does. It tells you what processor is in this Mac. In this case, it's an i7 Intel running at 4.2 gigahertz. It's one processor with 4 cores. It gives you the industry standard speeds for both Drystone, Whetstone, and Linpack. And if you can decipher that information, you're a better person than me. And finally, got our last 3 tools, which are local network. This is a nice tool to have if you want to know what Macs are on your local network and what services they are broadcasting on your local network. Like I have an old iPhone 3GS, believe it or not, that is out here. I have a Mac Pro from 2013 that's on my network. And as you can see, all the services in which it lists. So this is kind of helpful to know what services are being broadcasted on your network. And maybe, for example, you don't want it displaying or broadcasting or trying to connect via screen sharing, or maybe you don't want to have file sharing enabled on that computer. You would then go to that computer and disable those features from being broadcasted over the network. Our last couple of tools are tools from the old version 1 days, which are just our video tests or video tool. This will draw either colors or patterns on your screen. Maybe you're going to try to find if you have a dead pixel on your screen, or you just want to see what it looks like with various colors. Make sure those colors and hues are coming out correctly. I won't go to a FaceTime camera, but this actually tests to see if the FaceTime camera will come up on demand. In the next version of Pro 17, we're going to add support for showing the FaceTime camera if you're running Ventura on your iPhone. So you'll find that to be kind of a cool little feature. I've been playing with it and driving my wife a little bit insane because I put my phone somewhere in the house and I turn it on and I could see her. I know, a little bit of a voyeur, sorry, but it was hilarious. She got a good laugh out of it too. Finally, our last tool is our audio tool. This is a helpful tool if, like what I have in my office here, is I have speakers. I have 4 of them, 2 on my right, 2 on my left. And I want to balance out the speakers because I have volume controls on them. So that way, when I'm seated here and I'm working, I have a nice surround sound kind of environment where I play my music. So I use the audio tool in TechTool Pro to be able to achieve that. So that's the tools category. We've already gone over the test category. So last but not least, reports. This is where we store and keep a history of everything that we have ran today using TechTool Pro. And we keep this every time you run a test or a tool in TechTool Pro. This can be very helpful if, for example, you run into an issue, say, for example, maybe the volume rebuild tool or the partition repair tool wasn't able to fix the issue. You would then come here and then you could contact our help at micromat.com via email and say, hey, I ran into this problem with this. How do I go about fixing this issue? Or maybe you ran like Smart Check and it found a problem with one of your devices. How do I go about fixing this problem? And you can come here, you can find out what device failed, why it failed, what was failing. And again, this would be a great reference if you needed to contact our support department on how to go about resolving the issue. We do, of course, at the bottom of the reports in that particular pane, would give you advice on how to fix the problem if a failure was encountered. But if you needed more hand-holding or had more questions, our help at micromat.com tech support department would be able to assist you on that matter. So that's tests, that's tools, that's reports. Now you're thinking, well, I have TechTool Pro, it does all these things, it's amazing what it does, but I have to run it, you know, when I remember. Well, true. However, we do have one other feature that comes with TechTool Pro that was introduced in TechTool Pro 16. It continues in TechTool Pro 17. And here I'm going to bring it up really quick if I can. Let me do this. Let me stop sharing for a moment. And let me bring up TechTool Monitor, which is a part of TechTool Pro. This feature here, which comes from TechTool Pro 17, is a background process that checks to make sure that the drives are not failing smart, that you're not going below a volume free space threshold on any of the volumes you have connected to your Mac at that time. If it's an APFS volume, we create APFS volumes at your desired interval. In this case, I have it set for every 4 hours. I can change that to be every 1 hour or as much as every day, once a day. I can do a check to make sure everything is passing. I have no failures coming up. And if you have a Mac laptop computer, we can check and monitor the battery of that computer to make sure the battery is not failing on you or starting to fail on you. So a lot of proactive stuff without actually having to launch TechTool Pro and be active to test. It does it all for you in the background. And that's a part of TechTool Monitor. The one other feature that we have is, say, for example, you have a computer that's on 24/7. I have a few Macs here in the office that do just that. But I never look at the screen. But I want to be sure that they're not failing smart, that they're not running out of free space, that the battery, say, for example, if it's a laptop that I have running 24/7 is not failing. I can configure TechTool Monitor to email me when something fails or if something is on its way towards failure, like a warning. And then I can have it email me automatically. And that way, when I get that email, I can go into TechTool Pro, I can launch that particular test, and I can actually see what actually is failing and what to do about resolving the issue. So that's our TechTool monitor feature, which comes along with TechTool Pro 17. And I have a guest with me. Oh, look at this. Wow, look at this. A big hard drive. We love big hard drives. Hopefully someday we can get big solid state drives at a retail reasonable price. But until that day comes, we have to deal with big hard drives. That was my assistant there, the president of the company, helping me give a demo. So that's TechTool Pro in a nutshell. Is there any questions that I can answer for you?
Anybody wants to answer a question, you go ahead and you can unmute yourself.
This is Joanne, and I have TechTool Pro 12 running on Catalina,
Mhm.
and I have a 1 terabyte Mercury Electra hard drive.
Mhm.
And almost from the beginning, it's given me a warning, and little markers are on the first one, extended health, and on the third one, reallocated sectors count,
Okay,
and they're in the middle,
okay,
and it comes up as a warning.
okay. So what that tells me is, first thing you want to do, the Electra, I think, if I remember correctly, that is an OWC product.
Yes,
And it's a replacement internal drive or is it an external?
yes,
Okay, so it's
yes.
an internal. First thing you want to do with them, contact OWC, make sure that you have the latest firmware for that particular device. I vaguely remember, I don't know if it's their Aurea or ARA, or I can't remember exactly their other solid state replacement drive. But I do know that they sometimes publish updates to their firmware that might take care of a false flag. So
Okay.
you may want to contact them about that. The thing that I would suggest that you do now, if it's giving you a 5 error, which is reallocated sectors, that typically tells me that there are bad blocks or bad cells on that particular solid state drive. What I would recommend is going to Surface Scan. If you can, select the drive. If it's grayed out like it is here, like here's a good example. With Catalina, since you're running 1015, you can create an E drive or a TechTool Pro device. If you have an external device, that's what I would recommend. Create the E drive onto that or a Pro device onto it. Boot from that device, which then would enable your ability to do a surface scan drive or a surface scan test on that drive to see if it finds any bad sectors. If it does, that tells me that that drive needs to be replaced. Okay.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank
This-
you very much.
You're welcome. But first thing I do is contact OWC, say, hey, do you guys have any firmware updates to this drive? Because they might. If they do, apply it, see if it still get the same error. If you do the steps I just laid out. Yeah, because I can tell you, this is why I got this replacement drive, because I just had to pull a drive out that had bad blocks on it. And yeah, we had like, I think I had like 300 bad blocks. And if you get one bad block in the surface scan test, that's one bad block too many. So yeah, if that's the case, then you should replace the drive inside that machine.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
You want to tell us about the, don't you have a utility called Machine Profile? Is that a free utility?
It is a free utility, and I'm glad you brought that up. That one was dear to my heart. You know, that utility, I'm going to age myself like I always do, because I'm good at that. How many people remember back in the day an app called TattleTech? Yeah, I know. I'm that nerdy. It's okay. Don't feel bad if you don't remember. It was an app that actually would tell you what Mac you were running on. And I loved that app. It was a great app. I used to use it when I was a consultant, back when I was a spry little boy. And of course, everything changed with Mac OS 10 coming out. And one of the things that we were running into, especially from a support side of things, is we had always asked the usual questions when we had phone support. What Mac do you have? How much RAM? You know, what operating system? So forth and so on. And so I thought it would be a great idea to come out with an app, a freeware app called Machine Profile, that would give you all that information essentially in one window. And that's what you see right here. Machine Profile is available either through the Mac App Store, or you can also get it from our website when you purchase TechTool Pro, or if you just want to get it separately, you just have to have a Micromat online account to purchase or to get it for free. I recommend the Mac App Store. It's a lot quicker. But basically, it's a free app, and it tells you what Mac you have, in this case, an iMac. If it's an Intel Mac, it tells you where that Mac was built, when it was built. And at the bottom here, which I find very useful, and I know a lot of people do, is what is it capable of when it comes to installing an operating system on? Well, the lowest common denominator for this Mac, when it came out, was Mac OS Sierra, or 1012. And the highest is what it's currently running, which is Ventura, Mac OS 13. This is a great utility if you just want to know what your Mac is capable of and all the particulars about your Mac. It also tells you drive information, what drives are connected to it, what volumes, whether they're hidden or not hidden. Like I was talking about earlier, I have a UPS connected to this Mac. It tells you the UPS, how long it has until it drains, what kind of UPS, who's the manufacturer, how much power it has in that battery. And then, of course, a nice little plug for TechTool Pro 17, because it wouldn't be a free app without a plug of our flagship product. But mainly, the system information is the meat of the app. You know, what Mac I have and, you know, what is it capable of. And this is a great app actually to have on hand if you contact support with other companies, or what I've seen, and it's kind of nice to see, I'm kind of humbled by it, is occasionally I look on eBay and I look at old used computers, because sometimes I like to put used computers in our lab, because that way I get real world experiences with the used computers in the lab as opposed to buying a new one, which is pristine. Occasionally I'll see in the postings on YouTube or on eBay is a screenshot of Machine Profile of someone selling their Mac. So it's a kind of a nice little thing to see sometimes. And but Machine Profile is a free app, again, available on the Mac App Store or by going to our website at www.micromat.com.
So screenshot is the way to send it to somebody. There's not a generate a report feature or anything?
There is. If you go to the file menu, you can save as PDF.
There you go.
Yep, and that makes a PDF or a screen dump of it. Or you can save all that particular information as save as text, and then you can dump it into a text editor, which is kind of nice.
This would be a great tool for people asking questions on the BBS. They run this generate report and put it with your question. We always have to they ask a question and then we have to come back. What Mac do you have? What OS are you running? How much free space do you have? And then it goes on and on and on before we get to somewhere where we can deal with an answer.
Yeah. Yeah. No, this is, like I said, this helped our support department out. Still does to this day, actually. Yeah, we certainly have gotten a lot of kudos for it.
I love the feature at the bottom, minimum system and maximum system, because then when people say, "Oh, I have this Mac was built this year," I have to go look and look it up in Mac Tracker and see what they could possibly install on that machine, and then so that's a great feature. I love that.
Yeah, yeah. No, that was one of the things, especially in my environment where I have a lab. It helps me to know. Like if I have to go back a few generations because someone's running an older computer, I can find that computer using this app to know, is it capable of running that older version of the Mac operating system? So yeah.
I've had that scenario several times recently where people had some old, they don't want to upgrade their Photoshop. They still want to run a 32-bit app. They still want to run, Stop at Mojave, and they need to get a computer that would do that. So then I can look and see, okay, what on that computer, what we could get you used for $200 that would run Mojave, and that's worked.
Sure. Yeah.
$200, you can buy a Mojave machine that you can upgrade to, mini.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. Yeah, so this is our free app. This is like I said, great app and available Mac App Store or at our website. Okay. Any other questions?
So I see that you have several other utilities that are not inexpensive, but less expensive than TechTool Pro. Are those basically the same things that are built into TechTool Pro?
Yeah, more or less.
Subsets.
You know, I kind of use and pardon my analogy here, but I'm gonna use it anyway. One of the things that I like to say is, like, for example, we have another app that we have that you probably saw called DriveScope.
Yeah.
So what DriveScope basically is our TechTool Pro Smart Check on steroids. And let me see if I can bring that up really quick here. Let me do this. We go to share, new share. There we go, share. So the one thing about TechTool Pro Smart Check is, you know, basically it does what it's a no frills. Let me know where I'm at. Give me a pass or fail or a warning. But one of the things that we got from people was, I want more detail than just that. So our DriveScope app kind of gives that. So it's like a member of the band going out on his own, putting out his own album. That's what DriveScope kind of is. He's kind of doing his own thing. And so DriveScope, again, gives you the same information that you would find in Pro, but gives you more detailed information. I think the logs are clear on these guys. Where you don't find it in Pro, you'd find it in DriveScope. And here, like, we have attribute information, but we do it in a graphical representation. In Pro, here we just give it to you in a full layered table layout. We give you the capabilities of the drive, which is kind of uber geeky, but we give it to you anyway. One of the things that we don't really give you in Pro, but we do in DriveScope, is a short offline test. Basically, it's just running the smart check in iterations, whether it be a minute, or if you really want to go over the top, iterate for 5 hours and 17 minutes in the extended offline test. All these things that you see in DriveScope with information like you see here, all of this is pulled from the drive itself. All we're doing is displaying it. And if the manufacturer allows us to do a smart test if it's built into that particular drive. So it's a little bit of an extension of what Pro has that Pro doesn't offer, but it gives you just more granularity, more information that you wouldn't find in Pro.
Yeah, it recently on one of my Apple SSDs in a MacBook found it had some read-write errors. The thing ran fine, it was no problem. But I looked around finally, I said, well, found one on eBay for like $15, and I, you know, replaced it, and it has only 500 hours on it, so it's better than one that's failing.
Yeah, I mean, you can see here, like, I have a drive that's been connected to this machine now for over 7 years.
Right.
Yeah. Whereas, you know, here, I think this, well, the one thing about NVMe is they're not, and I hope they update the spec on this, is it says I have 705 hours of usage time. I think I have two kind of thoughts on this. One, they haven't really settled on how to correctly identify or say how many hours there is. Or with NVMe, what they may do is they put the drive in a sleep mode, where if the computer is not being used or nothing is being written to the solid state drive, it will just kind of put it in a hibernate mode and not count hours up, which is my guess.
It's got to be, because you use it
Yeah.
more than 29 days.
Right. And I know I've been using this thing for a number of months, and it's always on. So that's kind of my thinking, is it's a hibernate mode, and it just stops the clock until it comes back on again and it starts getting writes. But everything else, you know, it gives you the NVMe revision, you know, what revision this drive uses. It tells me that it's the Apple solid state drive that came with it, or in this case, this is the replacement to it. Tells me how much is written to it over its life so far.
In TechTool Pro, is there a place where you can see the data on the temperature senders, all of them, how so many of them they have in there? You can see what's going on.
We do for the sensors, if you're talking about the motherboard. We do have temperature sensors like for memory, CPU, GPU, Thunderbolt, proximity sensors. If you have a laptop, we also do the skin sensors. So like when you rest your hands on your laptop, there's sensors there that tell you how hot it is where your palms are.
Are those values in the report?
Mhm.
Yeah, on all my machines, I've always run max fan control, where you can see the fan speed and the temperature senders. And sometimes you catch this thing's getting really hot.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And then you've got the option of like ramping it up to full speed for a few minutes and cool that sucker down when you're
sure, yeah, and
doing
with
something.
that app, you can do that. You can force it to have certain thresholds based on certain sensors
Right.
and rev up the fans. We don't do that. We're merely just diagnosing,
Right.
make sure the fans and the sensors are not either in the fan's case are meeting the maximum capacity and minimum capacity of its capability. And with the sensors, make sure it doesn't exceed what the sensor is capable or can handle and not dropping below what it can handle. So yeah. So we're strictly diagnostic where they allow you to kind of play with the fans and the temperatures.
Right. If something goes haywire, sometimes they won't regulate and you can like manually, I just put it in the middle and lock it down and let it fan go because it's not working properly when not cooling it off or something.
Sure.
So I find TechTool Pro is not an inexpensive program. It's fairly pricey, and I think for many of us, it feels too pricey for us. I know at a certain point I stopped buying upgrades because it didn't feel like it was a good price benefit analysis for me. If I were to say when did version 17 come out?
It came out 14 days ago.
Okay, so if I were to upgrade, because I see I'm eligible for a legacy upgrade to the current product, not the subscription product for $90, what would it cost me to upgrade to version 18 when it comes out, I assume about a year from now?
I would assume, I'm making assumptions here. I'm not very clairvoyant because, Apple kind of throws things at us. But generally speaking, we come out with a new version of Pro, usually the latter part of the year, beginning of the following. Like in this case, we just came out with 17 2 weeks ago. And the reason being is because Apple had changed the operating system that we're very, well knitted into for security purposes to be able to do what we do. So we had to come out with a new version, but that took a lot of effort for us to be able to support this new operating system. So generally speaking, we come out with a new version, usually once every year, maybe twice, depending on what's necessary to support that version of the operating system, or if Apple, throws new hardware at us that we currently don't support.
So if I owned version 16, what would 17 have cost to upgrade to?
I don't remember because I know the whole pricing paradigm has changed. I thought it was $69.95, but don't quote me on that. I can't remember. I'm mainly in the technical side of stuff, so prices are not my forte.
Okay. And one of the questions along those lines, which is somebody like John, who is providing technical support for a number of machines in the clinic and his own business, and he owns a number of machines. I see that the license is for one user, one seat. Would he be able to move that from machine to machine as he's testing various machines?
Sure. I think I may have kind of touched on that earlier. What I would do in this case is I would, especially if you're a consultant, I would try to find an operating system, a Mac operating system that kind of encompasses a large majority of the Macs that you support. Install an operating system on an external drive of some type and make that bootable. And then once you boot it to that newly created drive, install TechTool Pro on it, and then go from machine to machine to machine And that way you're not deviating from the license agreement. It's one install, one usage, and then you can service a whole bunch of Macs. That's the way it's always been for us.
Yeah, so what I do is I have a SSD and a USB 3 pocket drive case, and it can boot anything from High Sierra to Ventura. And so that's what I use when I want to troubleshoot anything or run a utility. I just pop it in, pick my option key and pick my boot drive, and that, and then I can wipe the drive and install something else on or whatever I'm doing.
Sure. Yeah, and the other thing too, it gives you Finder access too, so you can search the web while you're working on the computer or pull down an installer, and it gives you a lot more capabilities in that regard, having that type of setup.
And then I put all my utilities on a separate partition that I can access from any of the volumes.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So that's how you would do that.
Yeah. But Apple's making it harder and harder to do stuff, I tell you. They're locking it down further and further.
Yep.
You boot from older systems and it won't see the new volumes, even though they're the new format is like they really locking that sucker down every time more and more.
They're doing it in two places. They're locking it down for obvious reasons. You know how I talked about APFS being not really well documented. I really think, and this is just my 2 cents here, is one of the reasons why it's not well documented is because security. They really want to keep people from trying to do things to it and finding limitations and what have you. So they're really, unlike macOS extended format where we had a whole bunch of APIs for it, there's hardly any APIs for APFS. Documentation for HFS Plus was just like, I had books on HFS Plus. APFS, I think I have a PDF that's probably about 3 or 4 pages. And that's it. So really Apple, when it comes to future operating, the current one especially, but future operating systems and with the hardware, is really locking down security. Security is their thing right now. Is security and privacy. That is really Apple's 2 focused goals, are those 2 things. And from a disk utility standpoint, like for people like myself, you have to learn what have they changed, because they don't tell us anymore. They used to. We have to learn as they implement these new things and operating system seeds and tech notes and what have you. What did they change, and how do we adjust to make those changes work for our products? And Pro is a very good example of we're very woven into the operating system and the hardware. And when Apple makes new changes, new security updates and stuff like that, we have to adjust for it, or in some cases we can't. eDrive had to go away in Monterey and continues in Ventura. Same thing with Protogo, because Apple now requires this, this, and this, and we can't do it. They just don't allow it. But on the flip side of it, they introduce new things, and sometimes we can harness that. And so we do add that into the product. So, I've been doing this for almost 3 decades. I've seen it where we had a modem test, we had a PRAM test, we had a rebuild the desktop tool. And as those go away and new things come out, we add those in. So as something goes away, we add something new. And that's really kind of what I try to do here as a product manager, is to see what's coming out, what's new, what people want, and try to implement those and add those into the product.
What do you think about the new integrated SSDs, that if there's something that goes wrong with that's your motherboard, that's history?
Yeah.
You're not going to be replacing that new SSD drive in that thing.
Yeah, I will be really interested to see what the new Mac Pro looks like when it comes out supposedly later this year. It really seems like, to me at least, and I think maybe you feel kind of the same way, that Apple is really making computers more of an appliance. Whereas, back in the day, we could open up the computer and put a new hard drive in, install our RAM ourselves, or replace our hard drive because it failed. Where now it's like, everything seems like it's hermetically sealed inside the case, and moreover, like what you were saying, everything is all tied in. The RAM is soldered on, the motherboard or the solid state drive is soldered on, or at least so difficult to get to that it takes a electrical engineering degree to get to it. It really seems like Apple is making it where if something like that goes wrong, you have to go to them to get it fixed. Now, to play devil's advocate here, I know when I worked at Apple repair facility, I can't tell you how many times people created ESD when they were installing RAM or doing something and they touched the motherboard and the motherboard got fried. So, Apple's trying to make it where they're trying to protect people from themselves. But at the same time, I'm old school. I still have my Mac Pro at home because I like having the ability to put a new hard drive in or upgrade the RAM and all that. And they really have gone away from that. So it'll be interesting to see what the new Mac Pro, when it comes out later this year, I would assume, whether the user, based on the new Apple Silicon paradigm, will have the ability to upgrade the OEM solid state drive or the RAM or what have you. So
Well, it's more like an iPhone. You choose with the size of storage you want, and you don't upgrade it. There's no way.
pretty much.
And the new iMac 24-inch is basically like an iPad. It's all glue. I don't think there's any getting inside of that thing.
Yeah. It really has become kind of an appliance type of paradigm that they've kind of adopted.
They were headed that way when they went to like the last almost 10 years. The 21-inch and 27-inch. When they took the CD out, it's real thin, and for a long time we were all scared to open those things up because they were glued together. Well, guess what? You can crack it open in 60 seconds with a little mini plastic pizza cutter.
Yep.
And I put new SSDs in those things, like dozens and dozens of them, because when they have spinning hard drives and you upgrade to newer system, some of them are unusable. They get so slow. Apple.
Oh yeah, no, they run like a dog.
They basically, it's bad on them, but they're just killing those machines. And so, and the SSDs have gotten so cheap now, I can crack one of those things and put it on there in an hour, and it's like a new machine.
Yeah, and I know what tool you're talking. I know iFixit sells a whole bunch of tools that allow you to pop open like an iMac that you have to take the glass off and then the screen out. So yeah, but yeah, I really kind of think, based on what I'm seeing, is a lot of the stuff that Apple, the new hardware, it's become more of an appliance than allowing the user to fix stuff on their own.
Or like in the new Mac Studios, the SSD does plug in. It's not soldered down, but it's not so it's replaceable, but it's not upgradable. And I don't know if that's an engineering limitation or they just don't want to give people the option to upgrade the SSD.
It is good to know that it's replaceable. So if it fails, Apple could replace it. It's a plug-in thing.
Right. And then the other thing too is then you may have something like a vendor like OWC where they'll be able to get licensing for the pins, because my guess is the pins are different than a normal pin configuration.
Someday somebody may figure out how to upgrade the SSDs in it.
Right. So in other words, they'll figure out the pin configuration to be able to make that a replaceable thing. Yeah. Without Apple's, without an Apple specific solid state drive.
I had a Mac Pro that was running like El Capitan, and it said that was the max amount. Okay, you can't do it anymore. But then I Googled around and I found out you can install new firmware on it and with the Apple utility, and then you can upgrade it to High Sierra. But Apple didn't allow that, but it was totally Apple tools that made it happen. I was like, oh, that was really weird.
Yeah, it's really their way of controlling things. I can understand where they're coming from, but at the same time, it's like, if the user wants to go that route, let them. They own it. So, but anyway, I digress. That's just my 2 cents on the whole thing.
Okay, so
can I fall back and ask one question about TechTool Pro that you covered and I forgot to ask at the time. So I recently ran this first aid on a 6 terabyte spinning drive that had a roughly 4 terabyte Time Machine backup on it.
Boy.
And it took the better part of a day, and most of that time was checking the what do they
Links.
call it? What's that?
They're hard links. They're basically multi-links.
Yeah.
The thing about a time machine setup is there are so many nested folders in a time machine volume that doing, so here's what I do. I have a time machine drive dedicated to just time machine, nothing else.
Right.
And it's only a backup drive. Do I validate it in like Apple's disk utility or even TechTool Pro? No.
No.
The reason being is just like what you said, it
Takes
takes
too long.
a long time to go through.
I thought, so if you wanted to, like, your time machine drive was full and you wanted to move it to a bigger drive, could you clone it? I tried that with Carbon Copy Cloner and Super Duper. Well, I figured which one. One would do it, one wouldn't, but it took days. It was
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's like, I'll never do that again.
Yeah, what I would have done in that case is I would have taken the drive that was my time machine drive,
Just
pull it out
archive
of the
it.
enclosure. Yeah,
Yeah.
either archive it if you wanted to, which would take some
Put it on
time.
the shelf, put a date on it, start over.
Correct. That's what I would have done. And
I
I've
don't know
done
what
that
the-
too. And then if I
I-
ever need to go back, I can always hook it back up and then I can go back to it and refer it.
So I don't know if that was just the new file format is the same way, but they're recommending that you switch to the new file format for Time Machine now. And
They're-
when you
they're-
do, you format it, and then when you tell Time Machine to use it, Time Machine reformats it again in a Time Machine format. So it's a special deal.
It's a special deal. It makes it, they put a marker on it. They make it APFS. So if it's macOS extended, it'll go ahead and just make it APFS because that's the default file system. Because they're thinking forward, of course. They're thinking you're going to use this drive for the next few OSs. And they're going to, eventually they're going to drop HFS plus from disk utility. So they're making it APFS at the start. But also what it does is it puts a marker in its APFS container called, what do they call it? We just had to look at it. I think it's called backup. That way, the operating system moving forward knows that that is the dedicated backup drive.
So it used to be people would throw other things on their Time Machine drive in the new format. Can you even do that?
You could, but I wouldn't recommend it.
Yeah, I don't either, but I've seen people dump stuff on there.
Sure. I mean, if you want to dump something on there temporarily, that's
Right.
fine, but don't make a habit of it.
Supposedly, I've noticed when your Time Machine drives, the old format gets really old and really big. It gets kind of really wonky and slow. Whereas
Yeah.
the new format is supposed to fix that.
Yeah. So basically, when it's macOS extended format, it does a FIFO, first in, first out. Same is true for APFS. So how it handles it is handled much better in an APFS format than it is in a macOS extended format. The reason being, I don't really know, I haven't really researched it why. My guess is because APFS has that container, that APFS container volume that you don't see. My guess is it manages it through that container. Whereas macOS Extended doesn't have a container, it's done on that volume alone. And that's why it's slower, because it has to purge out, put in, purge out, pull in, where APFS has that extra layer where it can work with that extra layer to purge out, purge in much quicker.
Yeah. So
How much extra storage overhead does it add for its own snapshots?
It actually is a variable. One thing about APFS over macOS Extended, whereas macOS Extended, you were basically fixed into that volume size. You don't see it as a user, but we see it, is that container, as snapshots get more and more, that container gets bigger. And then, of course, it uses a FIFO, first in, first out, depending on, what you have it set at. Whereas it will purge out, put in. So it usually is pretty consistent. When we add our snapshot, it gets a little bit bigger, but not too much. So I try to remember what my container size was.
The new format for our Mac Mini that we got, the M1, it's really versatile because we got it at the beginning of the pandemic and had Big Sur.
Mhm.
And then along comes Monterey. You just go in there, make a new partition, install new in there, no problem. Now Ventura comes out, disk utility, make a new partition, put it on there, 3 boot volumes. It's no problem.
Yeah, I think
It's wonderful.
my container size is like 300 megs right now, which isn't much. I mean, basically what's in that container is the recovery partition, which is a disk image that you boot from when you boot from it. And then the APFS snapshots are in that container, and that's it. So, I mean, that's infinitesimal considering, in this case, I have a 3 terabyte Apple Fusion drive. Now, of course, you know, I have a 1 terabyte in my MacBook Air Apple Silicon machine at home, but it probably isn't much different than that. And when you think about it, it has those snapshots that can be very useful if, for example, I accidentally delete something. I didn't have Time Machine enabled at that time, but I had Pro installed. I can still recover data because it has all those layers of snapshots that can still reference that file from time gone by. Yeah, no, the whole APFS container thing is wonderful. And it was something that I'm so glad to see, because Mac OS extended format, especially with the later versions of the OS, was getting just clunky.
Yeah, you used to have to fix it all the time. It wouldn't boot. I don't see that anymore.
No, yeah, APFS is leagues better, and I can't emphasize that enough. Leagues better than Mac OS extended. I mean, Mac OS extended, when you think about it, HFS and HFS Plus had been around for like 3 decades. And I can't think of another file system that comes to mind that had that longevity. So kudos to Apple for being able to maintain it and add features to it for 30 years almost. But it was long overdue for a new file system. And they almost went ZFS years ago from Sun Microsystems, but they dropped that. And then they came out with their own file system, which has the same things as what ZFS had, but much greater, much more capabilities with it. And as you can see, they've been doing that with every release of an OS. They've been adding to it.
So for a Time Machine backup on a external spinning drive, still best to use APFS on that spinning drive?
Yeah, if you're using Monterey or greater, it's probably going to force you to do that from the get-go. I still have a drive, a Time Machine drive connected to my Ventura Mac here that still is Mac OS extended because it's been grandfathered in.
Right.
But if I were to erase it now and then make it my dedicated Time Machine, it's going to force it to be APFS. Obviously, I'd like to get a bigger solid state drive, and I could. I don't need, you know, I could get a 2 terabyte for a reasonable price. It's a lot cheaper than having a data recovery company like OnTrack or Drive Savers recover the data. I can tell you that. So for the price of a solid state drive, like a 2 terabyte solid state drive or a 4 terabyte solid state drive is my dedicated backup drive, still hundreds of dollars cheaper than going to a data recovery company and not having my computer.
So Seagate drives that you buy at Costco come with 3 years of free recovery service from Seagate. Do you know anybody who's ever used that service?
So between you, me, and the Zoom conference, yes. And you didn't hear it from me. And I don't like to speak ill of anybody, and especially a company that I've dealt with for many years. Their data recovery, from what I've heard and what I know, isn't that great. Maybe it is for Windows support, but I've never heard anything good about their Mac support. So that's just my understanding and what I've heard from people that I have talked to from data recovery companies and people who have actually used their service, that they weren't able to recover the data from a Mac side of things. Now, Windows side of things, maybe they have great success. I don't know. But from a Mac side of things, not really.
You get it for free when you buy a drive at Costco.
Sure.
But I have multiple at least 3 different kinds of backup and a couple of them stacked. So I wouldn't need to try to recover data off a drive, I don't think.
Yeah, for me, I'm data recovery. I have data at home on my computers at home, and one of the things I do is I back them up to this drive, and I bring it to work. Because as you probably all remember, we had fires up here, and a couple years ago, actually 3 years ago now, the whole town of Windsor had to be evacuated. And luckily, I had this offsite backup in the event that, dare I say, my house got burned down, including my computers. So that way I had a backup of all my computers on one drive, and I could restore from that backup. So it's always good to have an offsite backup if you're able to do that. One of the things I used to do is I was the offsite backup for my father-in-law when he was with us. So if you have a family member and you trust that family member, maybe having an offsite backup with that family member with your data is not a bad idea too. The other thing too is, I hate to suggest this, but your house gets robbed. What do? They take your laptops or they take your computer. Those are valuable items. Having an offsite backup, at least your data is somewhere else and you can recover from it. So another thing to think about.
I basically won't work on anybody's computer anymore unless they have a time machine. It's just like, you don't have one? First, you have an Amazon account, Prime, ship it to you, $60, 2 terabytes, and come to 2 days, plug that sucker in.
Yeah, no, the best thing that Apple did was when they introduced Time Machine with macOS 10.5 Leopard. That was just like, thank you. They finally put something in there that all you have to do is say, copy my data to this drive, and I don't have to think about it. And it's been a great solution.
Yeah, it's crazy. I've seen, I don't know, recently I had somebody, I don't know, must have had an 8 or a 10-year-old computer and they never had a backup. I said, boy, count your blessings.
Yeah,
You're lucky.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who he wants me to work on his computer. I was like, okay, did you back it up recently? What's that? I'm like, okay.
Yeah, what's
so
that?
I gave him a link. I was like, first you buy this, and then you bring both that and the computer here, and I will do a Time Machine backup before I do a thing on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, waiting to hear back from him. I haven't heard back from him yet. I'll have to send him a messenger note.
Yeah, we've trained people pretty good. Anybody that comes to get the clinic, you got to have a backup, and then sometimes they'll have it and they'll don't know what it is, and they'll unplug it and put it in the drawer. And this, you go over there, and when I used to make house calls, says, "Where's your backup?" It says it worked. So I don't know. We look in the drawer next to the desk, and it's sitting in there. They didn't even know what it was, and unplugged it. I don't know what is this thing.
For sure, for sure.
Okay. Anybody else got questions?
Looks like Joanne was thank you. Yep, thank you very much. Looks like she has a new Mac Mini M2. Congratulations, just arrived this afternoon. We will be adding support for that machine in the next version, which I'm demoing right now. Obviously, I need to get my hands on that Mac Mini as well. So I'll be at my local Apple store probably tomorrow, knowing me. Kind of profiling that machine so that way I can get at least something in there so we can have support for it in the next version of Pro 17, which will probably come out in the next month or two.
So if you own the non-subscription version, I assume all the incremental updates are free?
Yeah.
You just pay for when 18 comes out?
Correct. Yeah. So when we come out with 1702, 1703, if you didn't get the subscription, you'll still get those updates. Because they're usually little fixes or little, enhancements and what have you. But again, when Apple comes out with a new operating system, or they come out with a machine that has like Uber this, Uber that, like a new Mac Pro, I'm kind of holding my chair here to see what a new Mac Pro is going to be like. Then if it requires us to spend so much R&D time trying to figure that, then we have to warrant a new version to be able to support it. But generally speaking, it's a new operating system that gets us every year. And Apple comes out with a new OS every year. And that requires a lot of like R&D time on programming, me, to be able to get support for it.
Okay.
Okay.
Great presentation, Christian. I'm glad we got hooked up again.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's good to hear from you. And for those of you who think that I have a little bit of a list, if you're not aware, I had tongue cancer I was diagnosed back in June of 21. I had surgery, so I had a partial glossectomy. I had nodes, lymph nodes removed from my neck as well. So my speech is a little bit of impaired, but I had speech therapy and all that. So that's why I was able to give a presentation, but I had to go through a lot of speech therapy to get to this point.
Well, it sounds fine to us.
Perfect.
I
you
would have
never
noticed it.
know.
You wouldn't have told me.
Thank you. I just want to let people know that if there's a little bit of a lisp, a little bit of a hesitation in my voice, that's why.
Were you a
but-
smoker? Is that where that, because is that common to have, I mean, is that a common cancer?
You're correct that it's common for a smoker or a heavy drinker, but I was neither. It was basically like my oncologist said, I just drew the short straw and got it. And I'm in remission right now.
Excellent.
Everything's looking good. I have great doctors, great oncologists, great everybody, who family especially, and friends who have been just wonderful through my treatment and recovery. And I'm feeling very confident that I'm on the right path. But I just want to let everyone know, if you're wondering, it's a little bit of a list, that's why.
Okay, Christian, thanks. We're going to stop the recording. You'll be a self-contained presentation on YouTube. I put you on our mailing list, so you'll get the YouTube link. If you want to unsubscribe, that's fine, but you can keep getting it if you want to. We have a weekly newsletter. You saw what's in there, like news and.
Yes, I did. And yeah, thank you for that. I look forward to seeing the link.
Okay.
Perfect.
So, all right, we'll say bye-bye, everybody.